Find out why two grown men thought making this car was a good idea. Although any buyer would like me to skip the history and just dig into showing you what's in the engine, I'm going to share the history, because if you are the next owner, you need to know what's in this engine. Also, some of these pictures will show you the components in layers. If I were to take a picture or video of the coil today, all you'd see is a cylinder hiding behind a box, not the layers involved of how it got there, why it got there, and how to remove it. You're going to need to know why things are the way they are, whether you're keeping it this way or changing it. In some cases, knowing the history may help you from reverting back to something that was already tried but didn't work. When Eric and I bought the car, it came with the original 1959 Cadillac 390 engine that it was made with. On October 28, 2011, the engine block cracked. Our mechanic at that time suggested that we replace it with the Chevy 350 since, despite its smaller size, it actually has more horsepower. I don't know if that's true or not, but that previous engine had to come out, and while I'm on that, this is where I learned to stop trusting the proverbial car guy. You're going to hear me use that term in a kind of cynical use from here on out. Every car guy in every forum or comment section says, "Why don't you just?" And then they propose something that worked for them once. Thanks to this experience, Eric and I learned that even car guys with a lifetime of hands-on experience soon found themselves in way too deep with this car. Car guys always think they have the answers, but once you hand them the car and say, "Have at it," they soon found out this was a bigger ordeal than their ideas could handle. Long story short, we were without the car for a year while it went back and forth between various shops. The Chevy 350 never quite fit, so another Caddy 390 was found. We drove to somewhere in Central California, otherwise known as the West Coast's version of the middle of nowhere. Here's Eric after lifting the engine with his bare hands to put in the back of the U-Haul. Most brainy engineers don't have gorilla strength, so he's kind of a double threat, but here's Eric's wife pushing his spine back into alignment, so there's that. The engine we got was a 1960 Cadillac 390, although Eric tells me I'm wrong, and he's pretty certain it's a 62. This could be correct. He is the one that located it. It's the same basic engine as the 59, but with one beneficial difference. Instead of having the oil filter on top of the engine inside a drum, it's under the car in a modern canister. Do you like pulling drippy 1959 oil filters out of an engine? Well, too bad. This one works like a modern car and is easily serviced by parts you can find in any auto parts store. This was installed by a shop in San Diego called Harold's Automotive. Harold's probably been turning a wrench on 59s since the first year they rolled off the assembly line. Guys like him are hard to find, an old car specialist who knows everything about old cars at a glance. If you're the next owner of this car and have any questions about it that I didn't answer, feel free to call Harold's. They can tell you everything about this car's history while Eric and I owned it. By the way, don't park along the west wall. Bad things happen over there. Come to think of it, there is no west wall, so maybe it's okay to park there now. Harold rebuilt the engine and painted it the correct shade of blue. We did away with the original snorkel-style air intake and went with a reusable K&N filter with a wrap-around air intake. One of the best moves we ever made was changing to an Edelbrock carburetor. In the first 2 years, we had that original carburetor rebuilt twice, and it never ran very well. That's probably typical for a 1959 carb. I mean, don't expect much performance from a legacy part. Upgrade to something reliable and save yourself the headache like we did. Speaking of upgrades, we installed a radiator overflow reservoir, because who wants a hose just dumping coolant on the ground? I can't believe that's how old cars used to work. The master cylinder was replaced with a dual master cylinder for the brakes, and the mechanical fuel pump was replaced by an electric fuel pump located at the gas tank. It actually has two filters. One is right next to the pump itself, and the other's up in the engine compartment where it bypasses the old mechanical pump. Here's the filter number, and here's the replacement pump. Over the years, we've learned to stock an auto parts shop behind the bench seat of this Ectomobile. When you fold the seats forward, you'll find enough bottle jacks to lift the car, replacement fuel pump, belts, hoses, a collection of other items I hope you'll never need. But in case you do, they're there. I'm going to talk about the store in another video. The car's coil mounts to the firewall right in front of the passenger side of the dash. Depending on the coil you use, you may need to route power through this white rectangular resistor first. With other coils, you can just ignore it and bypass it. The coil is wrapped in aluminum heat sinks to dissipate any heat and then has a computer fan bolted over the front of it. The fan runs at all times. As long as the key's in the ignition, the fan is running. The power consumption is low and the benefit is high, so we just let it run. Insulation was run around a hose that had consistent issues with drying out and cracking prematurely. 59 Cadillac plug wires won't work here because the 9th wire in the kit, the one that goes to the coil, is always too short. It probably expects the coil to be mounted to the carburetor. Nope. Over the years, we've used a set that went to a 57 Ford pickup and a 1974 Chevy C30 truck. The old point and brush distributor was replaced by a magnetic induction, and here's a quick scan from the shop manual to show the order of the plug wires. The car has 2 batteries, one gel cell for the car and a deep cycle RV battery for all accessories. For about 7 years, we lived under the impression that all we had to do was remove the generator and put in an alternator and everything would charge okay. Well, it didn't. Over those 7 years, we must have gone through 4 different alternators, each time upgrading to a more powerful one. Each time, it ran a little longer before dying, almost as if it was using power faster than it could charge both batteries. One of our tools was a battery isolator. Assuming this works properly, it allows power to go to both batteries. Assuming this works properly, there's nothing to worry about. Well, it didn't. In reality, a battery isolator doesn't distribute charging evenly. Long story short, the isolator charges one battery really well and the other one barely. 4 battery isolators later, and we still don't even use that thing anymore. The final isolator is still in the engine compartment for no other reason than it looks cool. It serves no purpose, it only confuses the hell out of car guys who look inside and want to know what the hell it does. We tell them it's a flux capacitor and they should mind their own fluxing business. In 2017, we finally relented to the idea that we just plain old need 2 alternators. After plenty of research, here's the model Eric went with. What made finding one hard is that it has to be a 1-wire alternator, meaning no second lead to regulate the output. Also, it had to be small enough that 2 could fit in here side by side. Lastly, it had to be the most powerful one we could find. This one puts out a minimum of 180 amps at a standstill, or 220 when in motion. So, good job, Eric, you nailed it. Now it was my turn to make them fit, so I drafted up a template for the bolt patterns, a template for the alternator housings, and a mock-up of what it would be like out of wood. A little measurement for what the belt length would be, and then a section of steel plate from a plasma cutter, and there you are. One custom wheel order later, we had 2 pulleys intended for this car. A block of aluminum holds a tensioner wheel that can be adjusted up or down by a bolt. You'd use this to tighten the belt once it's on. The silver pulley was needed to keep the belt's teeth from getting too close to the tensioner. I'm not proud of this, but that wheel's from a lawnmower. Funny to think a lawnmower part is now essential operating equipment for this car's engine, but it's been 4 years with absolutely no issues. Ever since then, it has never failed to charge. Every month it gets a quick trip around the block, and that brief ride is enough to keep both batteries charged. Here's the belt we ended up using. And if you look down there at the bottom, you'll see one tiny little issue I had to overcome. In the lower right corner, you see a silver pipe. It's part of the cooling system. You wouldn't want to rub against that. Sooner or later, either the belt, the tube, or both would eventually rupture. Constructed of bearings from my local Ace Hardware, this idler wheel was mounted next to the coolant exchange tubes, allowing the belt to pass over them without grinding into each other. One final inspection later by the head mechanic, and things were looking good. Eric sure seems happy. Now, who does he remind me of? Anyhow, here's the engine running with the alternators going. This reminds me of Mad Max, but replace the Wyland blower with dual alternators. And now, I'll take you on a video tour of how this engine works. Too bad Eric couldn't be here today to show you around. He knows a lot more about this engine than I do. Usually he's too busy to come around and work on the car. He's off saving the world or something important, I'm sure. Here we have the turbo encabulator. This is an instrument that allows the transmission to supply inversive reactive current for use in unilateral phase detractors. Ours has been modified to synchronize cardinal grammeters. The principle is that instead of power being generated by the relative motions of conductors and fluxes, it's produced by the modial interaction of magnoreluctance and capacitive directance. The original coil had a base plate of prefabulated amulite surmounted by a malleable logarithmic casing in such a way that the 2 spurving bearings were in a direct line with the panametric fan. The latter consisted simply of hydrocoptic Marsal vanes so fitted to the ambificient lunar wane shaft that side fumbling was effectively prevented. The main winding is a conventional Lotus O-delta type, placed in panodermic semi-boloid slots in the stator, every seventh conductor being connected by a non-reversible Tremie's pipe to the differential girdle spring on the up end of the grammeters. All of this leads back into the turbo encabulator, which successfully converts energy into the operation of no-for-trunnions. Keep in mind that whenever a Borescent score motion is required, it may be employed in conjunction with a drawn reciprocating dingle arm to reduce the sinusoidal depleneration.
Hi, Brian.
It was at that moment I realized I'd probably screwed up. Why does this look familiar? Where have I seen this before?
Hi, my name is Eric Eske, the other owner.
By the way, I just want to make one thing clear. Eric is not wearing the mask because of COVID. He has scabies. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Eric Eske, the other owner of this car. I know Brian is the face of the car, but I'm the gut mechanic behind it. Anyway, this is a 1962 Cadillac 390 cubic inch engine. It's a V8. There's been some modifications to the engine. It is no longer powered. We use an electric fuel pump now, not a mechanical fuel pump. You'll see the cover over here. Obviously, we use a modern Edelbrock 350 carburetor and air filter. The distributor in the back here, you'll see, is a new distributor, but it is a magnetic pickup upgrade. There's no points on this. It's just magnetic pickup, no issues. On the other side, on this side, you'll see that there is a coil. This is where the ignition coil resides instead of being on top of the block. We had some cooling issues with it. We've had some overheated coils. We put a fan and heat sinks on the coil to help keep things cool. These other boxes over here are kind of neat gadgets and control systems for underbody lighting. This normal steering pump, still original to the steering pump, including for the 59. This was not changed when we changed out the engine.
Quick edit here. We actually did change the steering pump on May 11th of this year. So that's a brand new steering pump you're getting.
Over here, on this end, we have the dual alternators. This is our pride and joy right here. We had to obviously make a custom plate to mount it and make smaller pulleys to mount it to because of the slow engine speed, the slow idle. Anyway, each one puts out a peak current of 220 amps. These alternators are self-regulating alternators. They do not have control wire or control system to regulate. Just turning on the engine and revving it up will regulate the output, and you won't have to worry about it. Each alternator runs a separate battery system. We have two batteries on this car, an RV battery and a car starting battery. We call this the engine battery or car battery. This runs the engine itself. This battery is only set to run the engine and the headlights and whatever the engine and whatever the car normally uses. This is our auxiliary battery. This powers all the devices on the car, from the underbody lighting, the strobe lights, to the top rotor lights, everything else on the car, the non-engine stuff. So with each alternator running each battery, we can make sure that there's no current drop, no voltage drop. Both batteries will be fully charged, and even when idling, you'll be able to run all the lights on top and the front of the car and not have an issue. On the brake system, we did upgrade the brakes to a two-circuit system. The original car had a single circuit system, which was a little dangerous. Having only one, if the circuit failed, we'd have no brakes. This double circuit system has at least two wheels with braking powder if one system fails. On the windshield wiper pump, we did replace the motor and the pump for the windshield wipers. They do work. We have, Brian even found a little jar for the windshield wiper fluid. However, it's still it's an original part, so the windshield wipers will not work while dry. Do not try and use it while dry. So basically, only use them if it's raining or wet outside where you know you have enough water coming down. The rubber really does stick. Dual batteries, we do have these battery switches here. They allow us to turn on and off the batteries to the rest of the car, including the engine. This is to both preserve battery power in the engine, and as you can see here, we can turn both on, and they're both working now. Everything that's on the car is powered up. If we're storing the car for any length of time, which we constantly do, we can turn them off, and the batteries don't discharge throughout the weeks or months we have it. Okay, now to the front of the car and the radiator. We've upgraded the radiator. Now we still have the original fan from the engine that helps cool everything down, but we needed a little more cooling power. So on the front, we've added these electric fans. They run all the time when the car is turned on. This is to help keep the radiator cool. It does do a pretty good job. Also, we have the transmission cooler right here as well with its own fan, so that makes sure that the transmission is doing great. So on the radiators, the reason we put the electric fans in, and for the reason they're always on, is during parades, slow-moving, idle speeds, where the mechanical fan is not powerful enough, or there's not enough airflow to keep the radiator cool. With these guys on, the radiator is always cool, even idling through a parade, going 2 miles an hour. We did upgrade the horns of the car. We wanted a little bit more emphasis on when the horn was pressed, so we added 4 horns. It sounds more like a train horn instead of a normal car horn, and this gets people's attention to move out of the way. This is a big, heavy car that does not stop easily. So on both of these relays, so instead of having the power to run the headlights come all the way through the dash and come all the way back out, which burned out our original switch for the headlights in the car, we decided to put these relays instead, so when the switch is pulled, the relays turn on and headlights turn on. This way, the main current only goes to the wiring in the front of the car and not all the way through the dash. This little box down here you see is the strobe controller for the front grille strobes you'll see on each side. This beam right here may look deceptively like, why is there a piece of metal right there? Well, this is actually a LED strip that makes the front grille glow at night. We call it the Christine lights because it gives it a little bit of a spooky feeling. As for the radiator itself, we decided to update it. Instead of having the main radiator excess tube or overheat tube go straight down and just drain on the street, we decided to add a reservoir tank to it as well. This is to make it so we never keep losing fluid whenever it gets really hot. On the auxiliary battery, in this case, instead of just going straight to the engine and handling the engine, since we have so many accessories on this particular battery, from the switch box we go to actually a splitter box. This splitter box will goes down into the heartboard, or what we call the heartboard, and the main console on the center front seat of the car, which we'll explain that in a later video.
Originally, when we had the starter put in, there was a slight problem, and even though our mechanic is a professional who's been working on cars like this for 60 years, he couldn't solve it either. As soon as we turned the key on the ignition wire would have positive current, but as soon as it returned to the reset position, the wire didn't go neutral, it received ground current, which melted the wire. After many attempts to have our mechanic to take a look at it, eventually the only solution was to fix it ourselves, and we did that by putting a special set of wires that go to that coil. That set of wires comes up here to these 2 relays. These 2 relays will allow positive at the moment you need positive current, and when the wire returns to the neutral position on the ignition, the wire then goes dead, as it's supposed to, without feeding neutral current, negative current back down to the starter. Don't ask me why they couldn't figure it out. We did. That's our solution. These 2 relays are important, and they do tie up here to this coil. Why didn't we put these relays by the coil? Honestly, when we did, I thought we'd be replacing them all the time, and I didn't want to lean over the engine that much. So I put them up front, thinking we'll be changing these out all the time. Nothing could be further from the truth. These have worked perfectly since day one. I kind of regret that I didn't leave them up against the firewall. Just understand that those relays do relate to this coil here, and their purpose is for you to turn the key. By the way, how does it work? Perfectly. We have been able to start the car every time. Here's another piece of equipment you wouldn't normally find inside of a 59 Cadillac. This gold resistor over here is complete and utter bullshit. It sure looks neat though, doesn't it? Just sitting there behind its plexiglass case. It lights up with LEDs at night. Nifty.
On the fuel system, you'll see that we have a nice little clear fuel filter right here. On the other end of the fuel, by the fuel tank, is our electric fuel pump. We replaced the old mechanical fuel pump because we had the same problem with vapor lock that we've had on other 59 Cadillacs have had. On the electric fuel pump is another filter, so that we actually have a 2-filter system on the fuel line.
Go ahead. Oh my God, this video took 3 weeks to make. It's a good thing I drink while I'm editing these things. Does it show? If you like the video, click the like button. If you hate the video, click the hate button. What the hell do I care? I'm not a YouTuber. I got a real job. I work for a living. And my job sucks, but they pay me, and I like that.